1987, a grandmother and her 13-year-old granddaughter vanished while driving the Pacific Coast Highway. No wreck, no calls, no goodbye, but 36 years later, a realtorial tape found in a condemned ranger station reveals her voice pleading for help. What happened on that road was never part of the map before we hit play. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life mysteries and shocking discoveries. The condemned ranger station was a box of rot and forgotten things. The air inside smelled like mildew and cedar, and the floorboards creaked under every step. Derek Whitley, an infrastructure inspector with the California State Parks Department, wasn't expecting to find anything that mattered. Just some raccoon droppings, maybe a few old maps. But in the back room, half buried under a pile of damp blankets and cracked thermoses, was a rusted metal cabinet locked. He broke it open with a crowbar inside mold-stained ranger logbooks, a coffee tin, and a dust-covered reel-to-reel recorder, heavy and warm to the touch. Despite the cold air, the tape inside was already spooled. He didn't hear her voice until he got back to his car and plugged it into a modern player for testing. The voice was shaking. "Female old, if anyone hears this, please. I don't know where we are. I don't know who they are, but they won't let her leave. My name is Evelyn Voss, and my granddaughter's name is Mara. She's only 13. We were just driving north." The tape cracked with static. Then silence. The last known record of Evelyn and Maravos had just come back to life. The Pacific coast shimmered like glass waves rolled against jagged cliffs, their rhythm steady and indifferent as the rental Dodge Aries glided north along Highway 1. The car was beige, boxy, and unremarkable, like 1,000 others crawling the coastal road on a summer afternoon. Inside it, Evelyn Voss kept both hands on the wheel, her grip firm, despite the damp heat. She was 67 years old, a retired biology teacher from Modesto, California, with a taste for old jazz and black licorice. Her granddaughter Mara, 13, slouched beside her in the passenger seat, chewing on the end of a Twizzler and flicking through a cassette tape box with teal-painted nails. They hadn't spoken much in the past 20 minutes. "You can pick one," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "Just not that screaming nonsense." Mara rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She slid a tape labeled Juan Gilberto Summer Wind into the deck and hit play. Soft bossa nova. Guitar hummed through the speakers, gentle and haunting. The silence between them was old, not hostile, just frayed. Mara had been sent to stay with Evelyn for a few weeks after her mother, Evelyn's only daughter, left on a spontaneous cruise, with a man. No one in the family had met. Evelyn hadn't asked questions, but she hadn't offered comfort either. She believed in enduring things quietly. Mara didn't. They had decided, Evelyn insisted. Mara rolled her eyes to take a scenic drive up the coast to Mendocino, just the two of them bonding. Her daughter had called it, Evelyn called it, an obligation. They had left San Luis Obispo that morning after a lukewarm diner breakfast and had been driving for hours, hugging the cliffs. The sky had turned a pale gray fog rolling in from the west like a curtain being drawn over the sun. Mara leaned her head against the window and watched. The surf beat itself senseless against the rocks below. "Can we stop soon?" she asked. "There's a state park not far ahead," Evelyn replied. "You can stretch your legs there." They passed a crooked wooden sign for Devil's Rest Ranger Station, 2 miles half hidden in tall grass. The highway narrowed as they climbed a slope and entered a thick patch of coastal pine. The sunlight broke into lines through the trees. Then the static hit. The radio squealed. Suddenly the cassette tape sputtered and stopped. The car's lights flickered, then dimmed, and Evelyn instinctively tapped the brake. "What the hell," she muttered as the car shuddered once and lost power. The engine didn't stall, but it sounded muted like it had slipped underwater. They coasted to the shoulder and came to a stop in a gravel turnout. Evelyn turned off the engine, waited, tried to restart, nothing. Mara looked over, annoyed. "Did you forget to fill it up again?" Evelyn didn't answer. She opened the door and stepped out into the warm, pine-scented air. Something felt off the trees, didn't rustle. There was no wind, no bird song, just a strange hum, low constant like a power line. Overhead, she popped the hood. Mara stayed seated, arms crossed, watching through the windshield. Evelyn leaned into the engine compartment, checking the battery cables and distributor cap. Everything looked fine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't. Then she heard it. Something like a snap behind her, a twig, maybe a footstep. She straightened and turned around quickly, nothing, just trees and fog starting to slip between them, like fingers Grandmara had gotten out of the car now. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" But then she did. A voice, faint female, repeating something. "Hello? Hello, can anyone hear me?" Evelyn froze. It wasn't coming from the trees. It was coming from the woods behind the turnout, behind a broken fence that led into the forest, where the sign for the Devil's Rest Ranger Station pointed. Mara stepped toward it. "Wait," Evelyn said quickly. "We're not going that way." "Why not? What if someone needs help?" Evelyn hesitated. Her gut-clenched logic told her it was probably a radio transmission, or some lost camper, but something about the voice didn't sit right. It wasn't calling for help, it was calling for witnesses. "Stay here," she said. "I'll check." "No way." Mara moved beside her, folding her arms. "You're not leaving me with a dead car and a bunch of fog." They followed the trail behind the signpost, weathered, narrow, overgrown within 30 yards. The trees thickened and swallowed the daylight. The humming sound returned deeper. Now it seemed to pulse through the ground beneath their feet. Then between the trees, the building emerged. A 2-story ranger station sat hunched beneath the canopy. Its roof-sagging windows bordered the front porch was littered with debris, moss leaves, animal droppings. A closed sign hung crooked from a chain across the entrance, but the door was open, not swinging, not cracked wide open. Inside, shadows moved, or perhaps it was just the way the light filtered through the broken slats. "Don't go in there," Evelyn said sharply. Mara ignored her. "Mara," she hissed, rushing after her as the girl stepped across the threshold. The air inside was colder, heavier, like the whole place had been vacuum sealed for decades and was just now letting in the world again. A rusted realtor recorder sat on a desk in the far room, its tape spools unmoving. A calendar on the wall read October 1984. A dusty sleeping bag lay on the floor near an overturned folding chair. Someone had been there, but not recently. Then the voice crackled again, louder this time, but not from a speaker from upstairs. Evelyn grabbed Mara's hand. "We're leaving now." Mara looked like she wanted to argue, but then something banged above them, heavy, deliberate, a footstep. Alan yanked Mara toward the exit, her voice low and urgent. "Run." They burst out into the fog and sprinted back to the car. The pine trees seemed to press in tighter. The humming grew louder. The path twisted once, then again, and suddenly the turnout was gone. Just trees, endless trees, and silence. They stood where the turnout should have been, but the gravel shoulder was gone. So was the road. No sign of the Dodge Aries, no rustling trees, no ocean in the distance, just fog and forest, thick as cotton and quiet as a tomb. Evelyn turned in a slow circle. Her breaths came sharp and shallow. "We didn't come this far in." Mara looked around, squinting. "We went straight. We didn't even take a fork. How can it be gone?" "Back this way," Evelyn said quickly, grabbing Mara's wrist. "We just got turned around. We'll retrace our steps." They walked fast. The trees closed in 10 minutes, passed, then 15. The forest looked the same in every direction. No markers, no worn footpath, no sign of the ranger station either. The fog thickened, not misty but dense, gray and swirling, curling around their ankles like smoke somewhere above them. A raven gave a dry mechanical caw, like an old door hinge swinging open. Mara broke the silence. "Did you hear the voice upstairs?" Evelyn didn't respond. "It was someone." Mara continued. "It sounded like they were trying to say something, but it was cut up like a broken radio. I heard it," Evelyn said finally, "and I don't want to hear it again." They kept walking until their legs ached. The forest impossibly refused to open. Then they found the radio, not a large one. It looked like an old Ranger's U Motorola half buried in moss beneath a rotted log. Evelyn crouched and picked it up. The front plate was cracked, the battery compartment rusted. She turned the dial. Then faintly, "Don't trust the voices. If you hear her, run." The radio popped and hissed before cutting out completely. Evelyn held it like it had just whispered a curse that wasn't a recording. Mara said, eyes wide, "That was live." Evelyn didn't respond. She was staring into the fog face. "Pale, stay with me. Don't wander. We're going to keep heading downhill. Downhill. Water flows down. If we follow gravity, we'll eventually hit a stream or a road. That's how we used to orient when I took hiking trips with your grandfather." Mara nodded silently, falling in beside her. They pushed through brambles and pine needles, the hush around them thick and watchful. A cold wind began to stir. It didn't move the trees. It simply passed through them like breath through bones. Then they saw it. A building. Not the ranger station, but something smaller, newer, maybe a trailer or portable shelter, the kind emergency crews use during fire season. It sat on a patch of flattened dirt surrounded by solar panels and a water barrel. A generator beside it was still humming. "Someone's here," Evelyn whispered. They approached cautiously. The trailer door was ajar inside. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows across a tidy, sparsely furnished space. A cot, a field table, several sealed crates marked Cal Fire, and a laptop still open and blinking, and a recorder, another realtor deck. The tape was playing sound leaking from built-in speakers. We left the highway at 2:42 p.m., approximate mile marker. 372 visibility was clear. Lost GPS shortly after entering Devil's Rest access road at 3:15. Radio transmission was received from unknown female voice message. They won't let her leave. Mara's jaw tightened. That's her. That's the same voice from before. Evelyn moved toward the laptop. A terminal window was open showing raw text files. Log 4.1.6a, tx to log 04 naskid b dit c x vovury. TXT. She opened the last one. EV recovery report, unauthorized entry, unaccounted time audio evidence. Name Evelyn Voss. Date redacted, incident type, temporal displacement, disassociation, apparent cognitive fracture notes, subject recovered from inland perimeter loop. 3. 8 kilometers from Devil's Rest station, located without granddaughter interview, transcript appended subject, displayed signs of time, lost trauma and long-form memory. Decay kept referring to static roads and the double of her granddaughter. Evelyn backed away from the screen. Her chest was tightening. That's your name, Mara said, her voice sharp. What the hell is this? I don't know, Evelyn whispered. I've never seen this before. There's a report about you about losing me, but we're standing right here. The trailer suddenly dimmed. The overhead bulb flickered violently. Then another voice outside the trailer. Hello, are you there? It was Evelyn's voice from outside. Mara's face went white. That's you. Evelyn grabbed Mara's wrist. We're leaving now. They stepped outside into the chill. The fog had receded slightly. The trail looked more distinct now, a path winding back through the trees leading downward. But they weren't alone. A figure stood near the tree. It looked like Evelyn, same posture, same coat, same face she was, looking straight at them, her expression unreadable. And then she spoke, though her mouth didn't move. He doesn't want you to leave with her. Evelyn froze. The figure took a step forward, then another. Its skin didn't move right, too smooth. Its eyes were like static on a TV screen. Buzzing, unfocused, Evelyn yanked Mara toward the path and ran. They didn't look back. They ran until the trail turned rocky and steep. The hum faded, the wind returned, the trees began to part, and suddenly the road reappeared, as if it had always been there. The Dodge Aries sat parked just where they'd left it, fog curling around its wheels, sunlight beginning to break through the tree canopy above. Evelyn stopped, heart racing. Mara collapsed against the side of the car, gasping, what the hell just happened? I don't know, Evelyn said, but we're not staying here. The car started on the first turn of the key as they pulled back onto Highway 1. Neither of them spoke. Not about the tape, not about the figure, not about the name on the laptop. But Evelyn couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror as if the fog was following them. The Pacific shone like it always had, indifferent, cold, endless, but something had changed in the car. Evelyn gripped the wheel tighter than before. Her knuckles had gone white. Mara sat curled in the passenger seat, arms crossed, legs pulled up, face turned toward the window. The radio was off, the cassette player. Dead, the silence between them had curdled. 20 minutes passed before Mara finally spoke. What was that back there? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She slowed for a sharp bend and kept her eyes on the road. It doesn't matter. Now we're past it. It looked like you. Mara's voice sharpened. Standing in the trees watching us in the trailer. Why was there a file with your name on it? Why did it say I was gone? Evelyn sighed. I don't know, Mara. I swear to you I don't. But it knew a silence again. Just the low hum of the tires on asphalt. Eventually Evelyn said, You ever hear of residual echoes? Mara blinked. What it's a theory I read years ago that sometimes when people go missing in forests, it's not just a matter of getting lost, it's displacement time, folding the land, remembering a version of you or duplicating it. Sometimes. Both? Mara looked at her like she'd grown antlers. That's insane. Evelyn gave a small, bitter laugh. That's what I thought when I first heard it. They didn't stop until they reached a gas station just outside of Fort Bragg, a sleepy coastal town shadowed by redwoods and a permanently overcast ski. Evelyn filled the tank while Mara wandered into the convenience store. Still shaken inside, she bought 2 sodas and a pack of mints. The cashier, a man with long gray hair and a faded giant's cap, watched her too closely. You traveling with your grandmother? He asked. Mara hesitated. Yeah. The man nodded, then tapped a newspaper on the counter. We had a pair go missing out here some years back. 1987, grandmother and granddaughter disappeared off the Pacific Coast Highway. Never found a thing, not a body, not a tire tread. Mara stared at the yellowed photo. It was grainy, almost useless, but she recognized Evelyn younger. Same cheekbones, same quiet steel in her eyes. And the girl. The girl was her, or close enough to be mistaken. Her throat tightened. What did you say? Their names were. The man squinted. Let me see here. Evelyn and Maravo sound familiar. She dropped the soda. It rolled across the tile and stopped against a freezer door. The man blinked. You all right? Miss Mara turned and bolted outside. Evelyn looked up as she rushed to the car. We're in it, Mara gasped. We're in the newspaper. What? Mara shoved the front page toward her. Look, it's us, that's you, that's me missing since 1987. Evelyn stared at the paper. Her hands trembled. The air around her thinned. That's not possible. That's not. It is, Mara said, breathless, and the photo. It's from today. I mean, it's from now. You're wearing the same coat. Evelyn sank into the front seat, clutching the steering wheel, like it was the only thing holding her to earth. I don't understand, she whispered. We left yesterday from Modesto. We stopped in St. Louis at Bispo. We stayed at a motel. I signed my name. People saw us, so how can we be missing for decades? Mara cried. A man stepped out of the store behind them, but they didn't notice. Evelyn started the engine. We're going to the police. The Fort Bragg sheriff's office was tucked between a bakery and a liquor store. A tired owl-looking deputy took their statement at the front desk, but his demeanor shifted the moment Evelyn gave her name. Hold on, he said, rising and disappearing into the back. 10 minutes later, a woman in plain clothes emerged. Mid-40s, short hair, cautious eyes. I'm Detective Susan Greer. Could you both come with me? Please. They followed her to a small room with file boxes stacked against the walls. She motioned to 2 chairs. You say your names are Evelyn and Maravos. Evelyn nodded. Greer pulled a thick binder from a shelf and opened it. These people, she said, pointing to the first page, vanished on July 14, 1987, somewhere between Point Arena and Mendocino. They were last seen driving a beige Dodge. Aries. The car was never found. Neither were they. Evelyn stared at the photos. That's us, Greer. Didn't move. Can you explain how you're sitting here? Now. Evelyn looked at Mara, then back at the detective number. I really can't. They were separated and questioned for hours. Evelyn gave details, motel receipts, gas stations, meals they'd eaten. She described a ranger station, a trailer, a voice calling through static, a duplicate version of herself in the woods. The officers were skeptical, but something in her tone gave them pause. When asked for identification, Evelyn handed over her license. It looked legitimate, but the system wouldn't scan it. Mara's school ID was expired. Her fingerprints weren't in any database, but Evelyn's were Greer, returned just after sunset holding a printout. Her face was pale. We ran your prints through old archives. They matched those of a woman declared missing in 1987. Evelyn didn't speak. You were presumed dead, Greer continued. Your house was sold, your family moved, you were never found. Where's my daughter? Evelyn asked. Where's Mara's mother? Greer hesitated. She died in 2001 stroke. Evelyn's breath caught Mara's face, crumpled. But she dropped me off 2 days ago. Detective Greer looked truly unsettled. I don't know what's going on here, but I've called someone from state investigations. They're on their way. You'll stay overnight. For now. We'll figure this out in the morning. They were placed in a small holding room for protection. The overhead light buzzed. Mara sat on a cot, knees tucked to her chest. Evelyn paced. They think we're ghosts, Mara whispered. No, Evelyn said. They think we're liars. Are we? Mara asked. Did something replace us, or did we just get pulled into something that already happened? Evelyn didn't respond, but she remembered the radio's last message. Don't trust the voices. If you hear her run, the walls of the station seemed to breathe around them. The static had followed them, and somewhere Evelyn knew the version of her standing in the woods still waited. Not all echoes fade. Some want to come home. The fluorescent light buzzed above them all night. Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat in the corner of the holding room, arms folded, eyes fixed on the metal door across from her. Mara had dozed off with her sweatshirt bundled like a pillow, but even in sleep her face looked pinched, uneasy. She twitched every few minutes, murmuring under her breath. Sometimes Evelyn's name, sometimes. Her mother's just before dawn. The door creaked open. Detective Greer stepped inside, her hair pulled back, fatigue tugging at the corners of her mouth. But there was something else in her expression, too, concern maybe, or disbelief. There's someone here you need to meet. she said quietly. Evelyn stood. State investigator sort of Greer replied. He's worked cases like this before, cold ones, strange ones. They followed her down the hall to a private conference room. A man in a dark jacket was already seated at the table, balding, late 50s, heavy set but alert, with a manila folder in front of him and a thermos of coffee steaming beside it. Evelyn Mara Greer said, "This is David Rusk, retired FBI. He consults with our department on high-risk unidentified persons cases." Rusk stood and shook their hands. His grip was firm, eyes steady. "I appreciate you talking to me. I know this must be unsettling." "That doesn't begin to cover it," Evelyn said flatly. He nodded and gestured for them to sit. "I want to show you something." He slid a photo from the folder and placed it on the table. A Polaroid, faded but sharp enough to make out two figures, Evelyn and Mara, exactly as they were now standing outside a ranger station. Evelyn froze. "That's from yesterday." "No," Rusk said quietly. "This was taken in July 1987, found in an undeveloped roll of film, left in a roadside convenience store in Point Arena. It was tagged to the missing persons case, but never publicly released." He pulled out another photo. This one showed the Dodge Aries parked off a dirt turnout. Rusk continued, "According to the original reports, a woman and her granddaughter were seen walking into the woods off Highway 1. A man driving a logging truck claimed he saw them cross the road at dusk, but when he passed the same spot. 5 minutes later, they were gone." He leaned forward. "Your disappearance wasn't a clean vanishing. There were traces, photos, footprints, half-burned documents found in a ranger's cabin. Your granddaughter's name etched on a notebook page pinned to the wall with a fishing hook. The case lingered for years." Evelyn swallowed. "But we didn't burn anything. We didn't write notes. We got out." Rusk tapped the table. "That's the problem. There were no records of you getting out." Rusk pulled another photo from the folder. This one made Evelyn's stomach drop. A man, maybe in his 30s, stood on the porch of the ranger station, half in shadow, his face partially obscured by a hat. But what was visible chilled her. The angle of his shoulders, the narrow jawline, the slight limp of his left foot. "I know him," she said quietly. "Who is he?" Rusk asked. "I don't know his name, but he was in the woods watching us." Rusk nodded. "He's been seen before," he said, "over the years in other disappearances." Mara stiffened. "What do you mean, other disappearances?" Rusk looked at her directly. "The ranger station you entered, Devil's Rest, was officially decommissioned in 1984. After a series of accidents, 4 hikers vanished in 1983. A ranger was found in a storage crawl space under the station floor, died of exposure, but no one knew he was missing. And then in 1986, a search and rescue crew lost radio contact for 72 hours. So when they emerged, they all gave different accounts of what happened." He leaned back in his chair. "There are stories locals say the woods were cursed by the tribes that once lived there. Some say the land remembers too much, that when people get lost it shows them something familiar, a voice, a loved one, even a version of themselves to keep them wondering." Evelyn thought of the other her in the trees, the eyes like static, the voice that never moved its lips. Mara shivered. "Why now?" she asked. "Why are we here now? If we disappeared in 1987, why did we come back?" Rusk looked at her carefully. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Later that morning, Evelyn stepped outside the station for air. The fog had lifted the town. Looked ordinary people, carried coffee cups, a delivery truck parked outside a bakery. A cyclist passed by with earbuds in the world, had moved on, and yet she felt like it had turned without her, like a gear misaligned. She checked her watch, 9:17 but part of her wondered if it was even her watch anymore. Greer came out to join her, sipping from a paper cup. "I contacted your old neighborhood," she said. "Spoke to a man who lives in the house you used to own. He confirmed your name. Your face even had a photo of you on the porch from back in the 80s, but no one's seen you since. What about Mara's mother? She remarried, had another child, passed in 2001. Like I said, stroke. She was only 39. Evelyn's throat closed. "Does Mara know she suspects, but I haven't told her the full details." Evelyn stared at the street. "I keep thinking this is a dream I haven't woken up from." "It's not." Greer said softly, "And I think you're in danger." Evelyn looked at her sharply. "There's something else," the detective continued. "We pulled footage from the gas station you visited yesterday, the one where Mara found the newspaper." She handed over a print out, a still image from the store's security camera. The timestamp read July 13th, 1987, 3:42 p. M. Evelyn was in the frame. So was Mara. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't an old tape. The security system used cloud backup. It recorded you as being there. 36 years ago, Greer said. which means either someone's manipulating the time code or we really are from 1987. Evelyn whispered that night. They were moved to a safe house on the edge of town, a modest Airbnb cabin watched by 2 officers in plain clothes. Rusk had requested it. Greer didn't argue inside. Evelyn sat at the small dining table flipping through copies of the case file. Mara curled up on the couch clutching a blanket. "Why did it let us go?" she asked. Evelyn looked up. "What if the forest or whatever it is wanted us? Why did it let us leave?" Evelyn didn't know. She wasn't sure they had left. Then a sound came through the wall. Not a knock, not a creak. Static, low electrical buzzing faintly from the corner. Plug outlet like a faint radio transmission bleeding through the wires. Mara stood tense. "Did you hear that?" Evelyn rose, nodding. They walked to the corner of the room. A cassette tape had been left on the floor. Neither of them had seen it before on it. Written in Sharpie recording 6B, "Do not play alone." The cassette sat like a warning. Black plastic corners worn, the words "Do not play alone," scrolled across the label in uneven block letters. The handwriting wasn't Evelyn's. It wasn't Mara's, but Evelyn had the sinking feeling she'd seen it before on a trail sign, in a logbook, maybe on the rusted reel recorder in the cabin. Mara stared at it. What if it's bait or a message? Evelyn said from whoever or whatever left it. A cheap cassette deck sat on the bookshelf beneath a row of mismatched paperbacks. Evelyn knelt down, loaded the tape, and pressed play. The tape didn't hiss at first. No music, no voice, just silence. Then faintly the sound of breathing. Not steady, panicked, shaky. A female voice older broke through like a whisper from behind glass. "If you're hearing this, then we were right. We weren't imagining it. The place folds it, folds people, it makes doubles, and sometimes it lets the wrong one come back." Evelyn and Mara exchanged a look. "This is Evelyn Voss, or I think I am. I don't know anymore. I don't know when I started being something else. It's been days, years. Time leaks here." Mara's breath caught. She's not Mara. She looks like her. She sounds like her, but she's not. She remembers things my Mara never saw, and when she sleeps, she talks in other voices. I don't think I brought her out of the woods. I think she followed me out. The tape clicked softly, then restarted. The same words began again. Mara stepped back like she'd been struck. "That's your voice." "No," Evelyn whispered. "It's a voice. One version." Mara's face twisted. "And what does that mean for me?" Evelyn stopped the tape. "It means we need help. Real help, someone outside this loop, this town, this whatever we're caught in." The next morning, Evelyn requested another meeting with David Rusk. They met back at the sheriff's office. Mara stayed behind too, shaken to speak. "I need to know what I'm dealing with," Evelyn said bluntly. "You mentioned other cases, other displacements. Tell me everything." Rusk nodded, slowly, sliding a folder toward her. Inside were 3 typed reports and 5 photographs, people caught in moments that didn't align with their timelines. A man in Montana who showed up to his own funeral in 2004, a girl in Vermont who vanished in 1968 and was found unchanged, wandering a frozen lake in 2019, a couple in Oregon reportedly lost in the crater, Lake Woods, who reappeared 15 years later, with no knowledge of the missing time, but wearing the exact same clothes. Each case had one thing in common: geographic anomalies tied to wilderness areas. Time isn't always linear. Rusk said, sometimes it loops, sometimes it splinters, and there are places, specific places, where those splinters bleed through like Devil's Rest, Evelyn said. Yes, that forest is a known cold patch. Native oral histories warned of echo places where memory could manifest physically, sometimes as a guide, sometimes as a predator. Evelyn nodded grimly. "So what do we do?" Rusk slid a topographic map toward her. A red circle had been drawn around the Devil's Rest trail head. "You go back in," he said. Evelyn stared at him. "No," she said, "absolutely not. You might not have a choice," Rusk said calmly. "That tape wasn't just a warning. It's a record of a cycle of a splinter. If the version of you on that tape believed the wrong person came out, then this version of you has to figure out why, before it happens." Again, Evelyn stood. "You want me to drag a 13-year-old back into that? I want you to understand the cycle so she doesn't get pulled into it again, because I don't think it's finished with you yet that night." Mara sat in the guest room of the safe house listening to the cassette on repeat. "She's not Mara." The sentence looped like a splinter in her brain. She stared at her reflection in the window, the darkness outside warping her features slightly, just enough to make her question whether the eyes staring back were hers. She remembered things, strange things, a creek she didn't remember, crossing a song Evelyn never taught her, but she could hum by heart a recurring dream of walking into the sea, fully clothed, smiling. She stood and pressed her palm to the glass. "I'm me," she whispered, but the reflection didn't mouth the words. It just smiled. Evelyn knocked once, then opened the door. Mara turned quickly, startled. "We need to talk," Evelyn said. "I heard the tape." "I know." Mara looked scared, not of Evelyn, but of herself. "What if it's true it's not?" Evelyn said firmly. "It can't be. I don't care what some recording says. I know you. I raised you these past weeks. I know how you laugh when you think I'm not listening. I know the way you kick the heel of your left shoe when you're nervous. I know how you hold your breath when you lie." Mara blinked. Evelyn stepped closer. "I don't care what the forest wants us to believe, you are my Mara." The words came out strong, but something in Evelyn flinched because part of her had wondered, and she hated herself for it. Mara nodded. "Then do we have to go back?" Evelyn hesitated. "Yes," she said, "but we do it together." Later that night, Mara slipped out of bed and padded into the main room. The cassette tape was still in the player. She pressed play one more time. They won't let her leave. Not the real one. Not the first one. The recording warbled slower. This time the other one remembers things she never lived and smiles in the wrong moments. The light flickered overhead. Mara stared at the machine, and slowly, ever so faintly, she smiled. Fog swallowed the world again. They left Fort Bragg just after dawn in an unmarked SUV. Evelyn drove. Rusk sat up front, studying a weathered topographic map in the back seat. Mara stared blankly out the window, her headphones in her face unreadable. It had been decided quietly. No official record, no sheriff's escort, just the three of them heading back to the last known point of fracture, Devil's Rest, in the hopes of understanding what had happened or what was still happening. The road narrowed with each passing mile. Pines pressed closer to the asphalt. Fog crept in through vents and door seals. By the time they passed the mile marker near the turnout where the Dodge Aries had once parked, it felt like the world had stopped turning. Evelyn slowed the SUV to a crawl. "There," Rusk said, pointing. "That's the same break in the fence trail. Curves west." She pulled off onto the gravel shoulder. The forest greeted them with silence. They moved single file. Rusk carried a hand radio and a thermal scanner. Mara walked in the middle, hugging herself. Evelyn brought up the rear, her heart pounding with every step. The trees looked the same, but older, somehow heavier, like they had memorized them. The trail wound past a collapsed log, a rusted signpost, and finally the ranger station. It stood just as they'd left it, 2 stories of sagging wood and shattered windows, but something about the air felt different. Thicker, charged. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the clearing. "I don't want her going inside." Rusk nodded, agreed. "Mara stays with me. You check the interior." "I want to stay with her," Mara said. "No," Evelyn replied firmly. "You stay outside if anything changes. Anything you run. Do you understand?" Mara looked away. Yeah, inside the air was still. Evelyn stepped over warped floorboards and into the main hall. Dust coated every surface, but there were new footprints in the grime, her own from before she passed the realtor player still sitting. Like a corpse on the desk, its spools were empty. Now someone had taken the tape. She climbed the staircase slowly. Each step groaned under her weight. The upper floor was darker, the roof sagging in places. She entered a room that once held bunks and found something on the far wall. Photographs, old sun-faded, tacked to the wall, with bits of rusted wire, dozens of them. Each one showed the same clearing, the same trail, the same station, but in different seasons, different decades. Some were black and white, others Polaroids, and in many of them she saw herself and Mara standing at the tree, emerging from the fog, sometimes smiling, sometimes afraid, sometimes watching themselves. Her knees buckled slightly. This wasn't a timeline. It was a loop, and they'd been caught in it before. Outside, Mara leaned against the SUV while Rusk scanned the tree line. The thermal monitor showed nothing out of the ordinary, but then a flicker. Something moved through the trees, a second reading human. Shape still standing just 30. FT away. He turned sharply, raised the scanner. "Evelyn." He called no answer. He radioed static. Mara straightened. "What is it?" "Stay here," he said. "Don't move." He stepped toward the trees. The figure disappeared. He followed cautiously deeper into the underbrush. The signal returned closer. This time, then he saw it. A girl, not Mara, but a copy of her, standing barefoot in the brush, her eyes glassy and wide, her mouth trembling. Rusk froze Mara. She shook her head slowly. "Not me," she whispered. Then she pointed behind him. He turned and the scanner shattered in his hands back at the SUV. Mara stood alone now. Minutes passed. Then Evelyn emerged from the woods, her coat torn, her eyes wild. "Mara," she gasped, "we have to go now." Mara blinked. "Where's Rusk? He's gone." Evelyn said, "Something's out here, it took him." She grabbed Mara's wrist and pulled her toward the SUV, but Mara didn't move. She just stared at Evelyn. "What's wrong?" Evelyn asked. Mara's lips parted. "You're not her." The words hung in the air like frost. Evelyn froze. "What are you talking about?" "You're not my Evelyn. Your shoes are wrong. You never wore those shoes, in your voice. It doesn't shake when you're scared." "Mara, you didn't go inside the station. You never came back out." The wind stilled. The trees seemed to listen. Then the real Evelyn stepped from the trail, bloody, limping, but alive. The false one turned and vanished into the fog. No scream, no sound, just gone. The real Evelyn collapsed to her knees beside Mara. "I saw them," she whispered. "I saw all of them. The versions, the attempts, some of them didn't make it out. Some never tried." Mara held her. The forest exhaled around them. Somewhere in the distance, a radio clicked to life. "This is Ranger Post 9, Devil's Rest Outpost Emergency Channel. We have 2 recovered. Repeat, 2 recovered." Standing by Rusk's voice. "Alive. They made it out by dusk. A helicopter took them to a staging point, 5 miles inland. Rusk had bruises, but no breaks. He didn't remember what happened in the woods. Only that time seemed to stretch and fold and echo back on itself." He handed Evelyn a small item wrapped in cloth. "I found it where the other Mara was standing inside," was a photograph. Evelyn and Mara together, smiling, standing in front of the ranger station, on the back in Evelyn's handwriting, "Second chance, don't turn back." She had no memory of writing it that night in a motel outside Mendocino. Evelyn tucked Mara into bed. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The forest was behind them. The tape destroyed, the photos burned. But Evelyn kept one thing, a scrap of the map with a hand-drawn circle and 3 words in familiar ink. In those faces, they were 2 hours east of the coast when Evelyn saw her again. A woman standing alone in the middle of a dry field just beyond the highway. Pale dress, wind in her hair. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stared at their passing vehicle with an eerie stillness, like she knew she was being watched. Evelyn blinked. "Gone. Mara," she said suddenly. "Did you see?" But Mara was asleep in the passenger seat, her head against the window. One hand curled beneath her chin. Evelyn let the question die in her throat. Maybe it was exhaustion, or trauma, or just the endless blur of the past 72 hours. Still, she kept checking the mirrors, and behind them the field remained empty. They stopped at a roadside diner around dusk, bright fluorescent lights, vinyl booths, that vaguely sweet smell of fried pie and pine. Evelyn ordered coffee. She didn't want, and tried to make sense of the photo again. The one Rusk had given her on the back, "Second chance. Don't turn back." The ink was hers, but the message didn't feel like something she'd write. Not consciously, not yet a second chance at what across the booth. Mara pushed her plate away. "I can't eat." "I know," Evelyn said gently. "I don't feel right," Mara added, eyes downcast. "Not just scared. I feel like something's in me." "Not me. Like it came back with us." Evelyn stiffened. You don't know that." "Yes, I do," Evelyn said firmly. "I didn't survive this long just to doubt you now." Mara looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Promise me something, anything, if I ever start changing, if I start talking in my sleep again or remembering things I shouldn't. Don't wait, don't hesitate." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You're not going to change." But Mara didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to, because Evelyn had heard it already. Because she'd already wondered. They checked into a quiet motel in a valley town that didn't ask for it. Evelyn collapsed into bed. Sleep didn't come easy, but when it did, it dragged her under like water. She dreamed of voices in the dark, not 100s, each one a version of herself, whispering, screaming, weeping. "You left her. You never made it out. You'll bring her back in." She woke, sweating. Mara sat at the edge of the bed, already dressed, a blank look on her face. "You were talking in your sleep," Mara whispered. "What did I say?" "You said it's her turn now." The next morning, the motel manager left them a message. A man had stopped by Gray Coat Glasses, said his name was Reed, claimed to be a friend from Austin, left no number, no forwarding address. Evelyn didn't know anyone by that name, but the name Reed struck something deep in the foggy memory of her early years as a mother. Something her daughter once mentioned, a childhood friend, a counselor, maybe back in Austin, back before the road trip, before the vanishing. She asked Mara. "I remember him," Mara said softly. "He used to come by the house. Sometimes he brought books and tapes. He used to say, 'Memory is just a hallway.'" Evelyn blinked. Why do I not remember that Mara didn't answer that night? Evelyn dug through the few remaining items they'd salvaged from the Dodge. Aries, most had been destroyed, molded clothes, melted cassettes, but there was one thing, a photograph in a cracked leather frame. Evelyn, her daughter Mara, just a toddler, held between them. But something was wrong with the picture. A man stood in the background, barely visible in the shadows beneath a tree. He wore a ranger's jacket and his name tag read ED. Evelyn's hands began to tremble. She flipped the photo over in faded ink. Don't forget who followed at 344A. Ah! Mara began to scream. Evelyn flew from the bed, and I found her on the bathroom floor, clawing at her temples, blood streaking from one nostril. I saw her. Mara gasped the other. Me in the mirror. She blinked when I didn't. She smiled. She's still here. Evelyn held her tightly, rocked her like a child, like she was 2 years old again and waking from night terrors. We're getting help, she whispered. Tomorrow, first thing we're going back to Austin. Mara's breath slowed, but her voice remained flat. She already knows the way. The next morning, Evelyn made the call, not to the police, not to Rusk. She called the only person her daughter used to fear, a woman named Dr. Celia Merrick, who once ran a small trauma therapy clinic outside Dallas and had mysteriously closed her practice after a government audit. Dr. Merrick didn't answer, but the voicemail clicked on. If you're calling about Project Orpheus, this line is no longer monitored. You are not cleared. Hang up if you're calling about the Voss case. Evelyn hung up. Her blood ran cold. She had never told the woman her name. Later that afternoon, they pulled over to a scenic turnout to rest. Mara stepped outside and stared at the horizon. Quiet and pale, Evelyn watched her from the car. She thought about the tape, the photo, the voice in the recording that swore the Mara she brought out wasn't hers. And then something clicked, not with Mara, but with herself. A tiny fracture in her memory, a detail that didn't belong. The shoes. The Evelyn that returned from the station wore hiking boots. Heron worn familiar, but in the motel footage from 2 days ago, she'd been wearing white flat shoes she hadn't owned in 20 years. Her pulse roared in her ears. What if I'm the wrong one? She whispered. Mara turned around like she heard it. Austin hadn't changed, at least not in the ways that mattered. Same cracked sidewalks, same skyline carved into humidity. But Evelyn felt like she was walking through a replica, like someone had rebuilt the city from memory, and every detail was just slightly off. They drove straight to the outskirts, to a one-story house tucked behind a Baptist church and 3 oak trees grown wild. The lawn hadn't been mowed in weeks. A single light glowed in the window. Dr. Celia Merrick answered on the second knock. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, mid-60s maybe hair, now silver instead of black. The skin around her eyes etched with deep lines, but her stare hadn't softened. I told you never to come back, Merrick said. I didn't remember I'd ever left. Evelyn replied. That made the doctor pause. Then she stepped aside. Get in quietly. The house was cold. Sparse, functional. No family photos, no clocks. The walls were painted with a matte gray like the color of anesthesia. Merrick led them to a back office and locked the door behind them. You shouldn't remember the name Orpheus, she said. You shouldn't remember me, which means something's wrong. Mara sat in the corner, quiet, withdrawn. Evelyn leaned forward. What is it? What is Project Orpheus? Merrick poured herself a drink from a dusty bottle and didn't look up. It started as a psychological resilience study funded through a federal trauma research grant in the early 1980s. We were supposed to help children of missing persons process inherited trauma. Children whose parents had disappeared, died, or come back, changed. Evelyn's stomach turned. You're saying I was in this study, you were part of it, Merrick said flatly. But you weren't a subject, you were a control. Evelyn blinked. What Merrick took a slow sip. Your daughter was the subject, and Mara was meant to be the monitor across the room. Mara looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means your presence was part of a test. Merrick said, facing her now to see if a child exposed early to unexplained trauma could detect a difference between the real and the altered, between this world and the folds around it. Evelyn stared in horror. You used us. I studied you, Merrick corrected, until the project was shut down, until the accidents, until people began slipping into places we couldn't map. She turned to Evelyn. You and Mara vanished off the coast in 1987 because you were on a monitoring route. That trip wasn't an accident. You were part of a field test. You just never came back until now. Mara stood. Her voice shook. Why do I remember him? Who? Merrick asked Reed. She said the man under the tree. The man with the voice in the recorder. Merrick stiffened. Reed wasn't supposed to have access to the field site, she said slowly. He was an embedded observer, a linguist specialized in voice familiarity. Evelyn cut in. He followed us. He was in the background of our photo. He's been appearing near motel gas stations, even in the woods. Maris's eyes darkened. Then he didn't come back as himself. She unlocked a drawer and pulled out a faded folder. Inside, it were classified documents stamped with a federal seal. Evelyn read the header: Project Orpheus Phase, 4 cloud identity overlap, manifestation protocol. She scanned the next page. Her breath caught. It was a diagram, a child's face. Mara's split down the center, one half human, the other distorted with echoing features below it. Notes: subject displays awareness of mirrored speech patterns. Internal conflict suggests the presence of a duplicate neural identity. Recommend cessation of proximity to maternal anchor. She turned to Merrick, voice rising. You knew this was happening. You built it. Merrick didn't deny it. I warned them. They wouldn't listen. You were supposed to forget everything after the re-entry trigger, but if you're here now and remembering something malfunctioned or something wanted you to remember, they stayed the night under lock and key. Merrick sedated Mara, who had begun murmuring in her sleep. Again, guttural warped phrases in languages no one could place. Evelyn sat in a guest room and stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker one by one near 300A. She felt it, a pressure shift, the sound of wood creaking in the hallway. She rose, silently opened the door, and saw Reed standing at the far end of the corridor. Hands folded, eyes dead. Evelyn didn't move. He didn't speak, but his mouth opened slowly too wide, and from it came her voice. I said, don't come back, she screamed by the time Merrick and 2 armed men burst from a hidden chamber. Reed was gone, only the wallpaper remained disturbed, peeling from the inside out in the morning. Merrick handed her a final envelope. Inside, one last photo, a version of Evelyn, bruised, blank-eyed, standing at the mouth of Devil's Rest, alone on the back. She brought the wrong one out. She didn't know. Now it's Mara's turn. Evelyn closed the envelope and knew what they had to do. We're going back, she said. Merrick nodded slowly, and this time Evelyn said, Rising, we bring back the right one. They returned to the coast under an overcast sky. No radio, no phones, no distractions, just a winding stretch of Pacific Highway, the roar of waves somewhere beyond the cliffs, and a silence so thick it felt carved from stone. Mara didn't speak for most of the drive. She sat with her knees tucked to her chest, a vacant stare locked on the road ahead. Evelyn kept glancing sideways at her, not because she didn't trust her, but because she was terrified she no longer knew how to tell the voice, the mirror, the bleeding nose, the dream about the sea. What if she'd already lost her? What if she'd brought something else back at the Devil's Rest turnout? They parked the car and sat for 10 full minutes without moving. The forest loomed darker than before. The trailhead marker, once just a splintered wooden post, was now completely gone, wiped clean like it had never existed. Evelyn gripped the wheel. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Mara turned to her. I think I already did. They entered together. The forest welcomed them with silence, but it wasn't dead. Silence. It was listening. Silence, the kind that settles just before a predator strikes, the kind that feels too perfect. Each footstep on the dirt felt like a question, each breath a countdown. They passed the clearing. The rusted frame of the ranger station had collapsed in on itself. Roof, caved walls sunken inward like a mouth finally shut, but the energy around it pulsed, not warm, not cold, just wrong. Mara stopped. There's something underneath. Evelyn followed her gaze. A cellar door previously buried under moss and rotting leaves now stood open by inches. Blackness yawned beneath. They descended the stairs, creaked but held the basement, smelled like mildew and iron thick in the lungs, old blood and wet wood. Their flashlight beam danced across cracked cement and forgotten supplies, rusted lanterns, a broken cot, a wall marked with red charcoal scratches, and in the corner a chair. A figure slumped in it. Mara gasped and clutched Evelyn's arm. It was her, Mara, or a version. Gaunt, pale lips cracked, dressed in what she'd worn the day they vanished in 1987, now filthy and brittle with age. The girl looked up and whispered, I was wondering when you'd come for me. Evelyn staggered. Mara took a trembling step forward. The girl didn't move. Her eyes were glazed but aware, her voice steady. They sent a copy back. She said, I watched her leave through the trees. She looked at me like I was a ghost, but I'm the real one. I remember everything. Evelyn's voice was barely audible. How long have you been here? Time doesn't work here. She said, it folds loops. I've lived the day we disappeared hundreds of times. Sometimes she visits me. Sometimes she hurts me, but she always smiles before she goes. Mara stepped closer. So I'm the copy. The girl looked at her gently. You were meant to be. Evelyn's head spun. No, she said. This isn't right. You both remember. You both feel. That has to mean something. They made her for me, the girl said. She was the exit plan. If I didn't come back, she would... She turned to Mara. But you weren't supposed to be me. You were supposed to warn them. Mara clutched her head. I don't understand. You were a monitor, the girl said. Not a twin, not a shadow. You were a signal. Evelyn stepped between them. I don't care what they built you for. I don't care what Marek or Reed or the project intended. You are both mine. The girl smiled faintly. I never stopped being. A noise echoed above them. Footsteps, a door creaking. Then a voice software. Familiar. Evelyn's voice. It's time to try again. Another? Evelyn stepped into the room, identical in every detail, calm, confident, a mirrored echo of the woman now standing between two versions of her granddaughter. She looked at them like a curator might look at broken statues. I was supposed to bring one back, she said, but now I see I need to choose. No, Evelyn said, trembling. The mirrored Evelyn reached into her coat, pulled out a real recorder. She clicked it on, and Evelyn heard herself pleading, screaming, begging from another loop, a voice she didn't remember recording. Not her. Take me instead. Mara's face crumpled. I remember that she whispered in my dreams. The real Evelyn stepped forward. No more loops, no more splits. I brought her back once. I'll do it again. The mirrored Evelyn tilted her head. Which one? Evelyn looked at Mara, the standing one, then at the girl in the chair, and her answer came without thought. Both. She took their hands and ran. The forest did not scream. It folded, the trees bent, the dirt churned, the sky turned white. 3 figures sprinted through the storm. 1 woman, 2 girls, all holding fast, all bleeding light at the edges. Behind them, the mirrored Evelyn stood at the cellar door, watching, unmoving, unblinking, as if she'd seen this happen before and had let it. They burst through the devil's rest trailhead and collapsed onto the gravel. The air was cold. The fog was gone. Above them, stars blinked into being. Rusk's SUV was parked exactly where they'd left it, untouched. Evelyn sat up. Mara gasped for breath beside her. The girl in the old dress stirred, then smiled and vanished like dust in sunlight. Evelyn didn't speak. Not for a long time, not even when Mara clutched her, or when the headlights of a ranger patrol appeared down the road. She stared into the dark, into the place where the other Evelyn had watched and wondered, had she brought back the right one, or had the forest finally let her choose, because it no longer needed to? The house was supposed to be gone. Evelyn remembered the address with absolute clarity. 435 Sycamore Lane, Austin, Texas, the place she'd raised her daughter. The last house she ever called home before the road trip that split everything open. County records showed it had been demolished in 1995, a duplex built over the lot. No trace of the Voss family remained, but when they returned to the address late one October afternoon, there, it was the house. Not a duplex, not a construction site. The same 2-bedroom colonial, with the green shutters and cracked driveway. Same bent mailbox, same doorbell with a lagging chime. Even the weeds had returned. Evelyn parked the car and stared in stunned silence. Is this a memory? Mara whispered. Evelyn stepped outnumbered. It's worse inside. Everything was perfect furniture, untouched air, stale but familiar. The couch where Evelyn used to fall asleep, watching VS tapes, the kitchen table with a scratch shaped like a 7. The hallway mirror her daughter once covered with newspaper after Evelyn caught her staring at it for too long. Mara wandered into her old room. It still had the purple walls, the crooked poster of a white horse, even the dent in the floorboard where she once hid candy wrappers. I don't remember any of this, she whispered. But then she did, bits and pieces, fragments, the way her room smelled when it rained, the sound of a voice humming through the vent at night. I lived here, she said aloud, but not me. Me. Evelyn knelt by the bed on the floor beneath a loose plank. She found a tape recorder and a note. If you're reading this, she's not gone. She's just waiting for a way back that night. Evelyn couldn't sleep. She kept seeing that other version of herself. Calm, cold recording warnings into machines she'd never touched. She thought about the girl in the chair, how she'd faded like an unfinished memory, and how Mara had not asked a single question about it since she went to the kitchen for water. Stopped cold. A light was on in the living room. Mara sat cross-legged on the carpet, staring at the old realtor player, the one Evelyn had thrown out 30 years ago. Only now it was working, spinning, playing something that didn't exist. Evelyn stepped closer. Mara turned. Her eyes were not Mara's. They were too wide, too, still too, knowing you brought the wrong one. Home, she said. Evelyn staggered back. Number brought you. The girl smiled. She remembers the pain. I remember the instruction I was made to last. She wasn't. The player clicked a new voice. Played. If you hear this, then you've crossed back. This version is unstable. You need to reset. Burn the structure. Re-anchor. The girl Mara, or the thing inside her, tilted its head. Will you burn me? Evelyn didn't answer. She backed toward the door. I'll find her, she said, the real one. The girl stood. She never left. Then her voice shifted, split like multiple echoes trying to speak at once. She never left. She never left. She never. Evelyn ran. She drove blindly for hours, headlights barely slicing the dark when she finally stopped. It was at a shuttered school on the edge of town. She slept in the car, and in her dream, Mara stood at the edge of a cornfield, barefoot and humming behind her, the house, the real house, burning at dawn. Evelyn made a call. Merrick answered. She's not right, Evelyn said. The girl I brought back, she's not her. She looks like her, talks like her, but there's nothing underneath. Merrick didn't hesitate. You've seen the house? Yes, then it's not over. What do I do? You go back. You find the tether. Evelyn's voice cracked. And if I can't, then neither of you get out again. She returned one last time to Devil's Rest alone. The forest didn't resist it, welcomed her as if it knew the cellar was gone. The station leveled but buried in the dirt. Where the cellar door once stood was another recorder. She pressed play. She never left because she was never taken. You were the version that came back that was the girl you wanted, not the one you had. Evelyn sank to her knees and began to scream back in Austin. The house disappeared again, replaced by the duplex just as the record said. But in a dusty attic across town, an old real estate agent discovered something strange behind a sealed wall. A photograph of Evelyn Voss and two girls beside her, neither labeled, both identical, one smiling one. Not. She stood at the edge of a clearing that didn't exist on any map somewhere behind Devil's Rest. Somewhere between time and memory, Evelyn wasn't even sure how she'd gotten there, only that she had been here before in fragments, in dreams, in fears that lived just beneath her skin. The trees here were older than sound. The dirt didn't crunch. It remembered at the center of the clearing was a chair, empty, facing nothing. Evelyn didn't want to sit in it, but she did. The memory began as it always did. A road trip, laughter, Mara's voice asking if they could stop for ice cream. The sun cutting across the windshield like a blade, and then the skip time fractured. Suddenly, it was night. The car was parked on the shoulder of the Pacific Coast Highway, and Evelyn was alone. She found herself standing outside the Dodge Aries calling Mara's name. No response, just the sound of waves in the distance, then headlights too far down the road. Someone coming. She remembered this part. This was when she had started to forget, not because her memory failed her, but because someone made it fail. The figure stepped from the darkness. Reed or something, wearing his face. Hello again, he said in that gentle, practiced voice of a therapist or a hypnotist. I remember. Now Evelyn whispered, You were there the whole time. He nodded, monitoring, observing, correcting when necessary. Why her? Because Mara is a gateway. He said, a rare one. Children like her born on the edge of trauma can see the folds walk at them, shape them. Evelyn's throat tightened. So you fractured her. I made her useful. You would have left her broken. We gave her purpose. The wind shifted, the chair beneath. Evelyn began to vibrate softly like the start of an earthquake. Reed stepped closer, but something changed. You bonded to a version that wasn't supposed to exist. You brought her out. You protected her because she's mine. No, he said, she was never yours. She was constructed, copied, meant to serve as a key. You fell in love with a memory, then so did she. Evelyn snapped, and suddenly Reed was gone. She stood again. The forest had vanished now. She was standing in her old home, the real one. Austin, 1986. She saw herself in the kitchen, younger, humming, baking something. Mara sat at the table, with her crayons babbling about school. Then something off the young Evelyn turned and looked right at her through time, through memory, and smiled. It's not too late, you. No, the younger version said you can choose. A door opened behind her. White light searing. Evelyn stepped toward it. At the threshold stood two versions of Mara. One looked exactly as she had in the forest, wild-eyed, trembling, scared. The other looked calm, composed, familiar. Both reached for her hand. You know which one I am. Said one. Please, said the other. Don't leave me again. Evelyn's hands hovered in the space between them. Both warm, both real, both her girl. But one of them had never left this place, and one had learned how to escape. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and chose the memory. shattered the forest, disappeared. She woke in a hospital room near Mendocino. Rusk was asleep in a chair by the window. Mara sat at her side holding her hand. No machines beeped, no wounds bandaged, just the kind of deep exhaustion that felt like it came from before she was born. "Mara," she whispered. The girl looked up, smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't off. It was hers. "I thought I lost you," Evelyn said. "You never did," Mara said softly. "You just didn't know where to look." Evelyn reached out, brushing hair from her forehead, and this time she felt no static in the air, no split beneath the skin, no wrongness, just presence real and whole. Later, as the sun set behind the window, Evelyn asked Rusk a single question. "Do you believe in memory?" He nodded. "More than I believe in facts." "Good," she said, "because the facts keep changing in a records vault in Austin. The original file on Project Orpheus was quietly erased in its place. Status contained subject, reintegrated tether reestablished, and beneath that warning, do not initiate field tests in Coastal Corridor 17B until echo pattern clears. Residual identity interference, risk high somewhere in a town that doesn't exist anymore. An empty house waits inside a chair, a mirror, and a child's voice humming, a song that was never taught. The years went quiet. After that, there were no more tapes, no flickers in the mirror, no sudden doubles in the corners of photographs for the first time since the vanishing Evelyn Voss lived without. Constantly checking the rearview mirror, Mara grew up not quickly, not suddenly, just steadily. She never asked about the other versions. Again, she didn't talk about the chair, or the mirror, or the cellar beneath Devil's Rest, and Evelyn didn't push. Some memories were meant to be left where they were, but on Mara's 18th birthday, a letter arrived, no stamp, no return address, just her name on the front in Evelyn's handwriting, but Evelyn didn't write it inside. "I'm glad you made it out." "I didn't, but that's okay. Someone had to stay behind and keep it closed. This time, let it end. Signed, simply, Mara." Evelyn burned the letter and didn't tell her granddaughter. They moved inland, far from the ocean, far from the folding roads, to a place where trees grew straight and time kept its shape. Evelyn took up gardening. Mara started at a community college studying linguistics that made Evelyn smile, still chasing echoes after all. One autumn night, Mara asked her a question over tea. "Do you think I'm still me, Evelyn?" Looked at her long and hard, then replied, "I think the fact that you asked means yes." Mara nodded. "I dream about her sometimes, the one who stayed." Evelyn stirred her tea. "Does she speak?" Mara paused. "Number. She watches. She hums." They didn't speak the rest of the night, but Evelyn sat in Mara's room until she fell asleep, just like she used to when she was little. Years later, after Evelyn passed quietly in her sleep, Mara found something buried beneath the floorboards of her grandmother's bedroom, a sealed tin box inside a map of the Pacific Coast Highway, a photo of the real house on Sycamore Lane burned at the corners, a charred Realtor recorder, and one last letter. "If you're reading this, you've outlived it. Don't go back to Devil's Rest. If you hear humming in the trees, walk away, and if someone ever tells you they remember a version of you that isn't yours, tell them that one stayed behind." Amara wept for a long time, then packed the box away. She never tried to return, not to the trailhead, not to the ranger station, not to the chair in the clearing, but she did return to language, to memory, to the fragments she wrote, papers about auditory trauma, recursive hallucinations, identity echoes in PTSD. Patience, no one knew how she understood it so intimately, but everyone agreed she understood one winter while walking through a snow-covered field outside her apartment. She stopped because she heard it faint, low, coming from nowhere, humming a child's voice, familiar. Mara turned slowly, but there was nothing, no one, just the sound hanging in the still air, like a thread to something long buried. She smiled gently, not afraid, and whispered to the wind, "It's okay." I remember, for both of us in 1987, Evelyn and Morales vanished on a stretch of the Pacific Coast Highway near Devil's Rest. Despite search efforts, no vehicle bodies or evidence of foul play were found. The case went cold in 2003. A ranger discovered a broken Realtorial recorder in a collapsed station near the original site. It contained no tape, just static. In 2024. The trail was permanently closed due to environmental instability. No one is permitted past the gate, but every so often a visitor reports hearing a girl's voice just ahead in the trees, humming something that feels like it belongs to someone they used to.